Council is now in session. We'll begin with the pledge by Councilman Kenner.
Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Bailey will lead us in prayer.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank the Lord for another day of life, the opportunity together to conduct the city's business. We thank you for your grace, for your mercy. We thank you for your watch, care, and protection of all of our city employees. We pray that you just help us today to make decisions that be wise and pleasing in your sight. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Dr. Smith, please call roll.
Broadhurst,
Here.
McGowan,
Here.
Bailey,
Here.
Oakley, Kennemer,
Here.
Mayor Honey.
Here.
First item are the minutes from the January 20th council meeting.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the minutes of January 20th, 2026 council meeting.
Dr. Smith, please call roll.
Broadhurst,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Oakley, Kennemer,
Yes.
unanimous to approve.
Next item, need to set a public hearing for a request from Hut Birmingham DBA Pizza Hut for a beer and wine license.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we set a public hearing on February the 17th, 2026 to hear the request of Hut Birmingham LLC doing business as Pizza Hut to obtain an on premises beer and wine license for the restaurant located at 6815 US Highway 431. This was unanimously approved by the Alcohol Review Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Smith, please call roll.
Broadhurst,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Oakley, Kennemer,
Yes.
unanimous to approve.
Next item is ordinance 2031-26.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2031-26 to approve burn permit regulation.
Second.
Dr. Smith, please call roll.
Broadhurst,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Oakley, Kennemer,
Yes.
unanimous to approve.
Now is the time and place set to hear comments on the revised City of Alphaville zoning ordinance. Before we begin public comments, I'd like to allow Wendy Moeller with Compass Point Planning to kind of introduce her role in this project.
Good morning, council. Yes, so my name is Wendy Moeller. I'm with Compass Point Planning, a planning firm out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I am a trained community planner who has worked with communities similar to Albertville for my entire 30-year career, working on ordinances and comprehensive plans. I have started working with the city to help with some of the zoning and planning issues. And for this round of revisions, what we were looking to do was coincide with the general code work that the city has been doing to codify all of their ordinances, not just the zoning ordinance. And so I was brought on to help reformat that, address any comments that came from general code, as well as any inconsistencies I saw or cleanup that was necessary, again, focusing on addressing some inconsistent terminology and general reformatting to make it easier to use, and again, to kind of address issues with terminology and stuff that didn't change the substance of the ordinance. The only kind of substantial changes we made this round were with the sign regulations because of case law that comes from the Supreme Court dealing with content. So we did not focus on changing the amount of signs you could have, the height, the area. It was really about how signs are regulated without referring to content in the message. So the other part of that was digitizing the city's zoning map. So we took the existing zoning maps from paper, and I literally assigned that to the GIS, and I know you're working on additional mapping, but that's what created the map you have now, which is just a digital version of the existing zoning.
Thank you very much.
All right.
At this time, we will take public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make comment?
Good morning, my name's Trey Chambliss. I just had some questions about part that I seen a change that didn't make any sense to me. And it is regarding the residential zoning on specifically the R4 zoning for multifamily up to 12 units per building. The current, let me get both of these pulled up, sorry. The current zoning has setbacks on the front and back of 20 and then the sides of 8. And that changed to 35, and the 8 stayed the same. And I didn't quite get that. And then the minimum lot width was 75. And now it says 80 plus 10 for each additional unit after the first unit. So, 2 questions, why the setbacks are coming in so far, and then on the minimum lot width, does the unit apply to the number of units or the number of buildings? Because under the definition on dwelling unit, it has the actual units. So did they mean unit or did they mean building? If you put a 12 unit building in, then you need 190 foot of width. So, and I own a lot that I've spent a lot of money on plans and surveys and all kinds of stuff, and this will directly affect it. Cause I plan to put 4 duplexes on it, but it's not, under this, it's basically become a worthless lot. So, I don't know what I would, like, what would, if we can make that make sense to me, that's what I'm looking for.
Sure. With any questions, what we'll do is, Wendy's gonna kind of jot down any of those things and try to address them after, we've had all the comments.
Okay.
I can say that, as Wendy stated, there was no intent to change any of the actual zoning. It was just a reformat of that part. The only substantial changes were in signs. So there may just be some inconsistency there, that.
Yeah, cause it took away the minimum lot square footage. It went from, it was broke out to where you get over 1 unit from 12,000 and 1,500 for each additional after that, and now it says none, but then the width part changed, which adds a lot more footage to that. So anything that's existing is, I mean, I've got a 110 by 200 lot, so at that point it's not.
We'll take a look and try to get that clarified for you. As I said, there was not any intent in actually changing the R4 zoning.
And then one other thing that I just noticed under the R5, for 12, it's for 12 plus units per building, and it says that at one point, and then it says not more than 12 units per building down below it. So I don't know if that's just a mistake.
All right, we'll try to get that clarified for you as well.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make comment?
I'm Bonnie Callahan, a longtime resident, and actually, my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents settled out. And I've spent many hours comparing this new proposed zoning ordinance to the existing one, and the conclusion is unavoidable that it is essentially the same, and I understand that that was kind of your intent. The only meaningful effect of this new ordinance is that it forgives the sins of the father.
Since the owning ordinance you approved in 2015, which is essentially the same one, this city has suffered a decline in aesthetics and a reduction in property values in many areas, not because of the ordinance was inadequate, never has been, but because you failed to ensure it was enforced. You as the city council adopted these regulations in good faith more than 10 years ago. You delegated enforcement to the city's executive officer, Mayor Tracy Honey, and that's his job. But ultimately, responsibility does not end with delegation. Enforcement has not occurred. Compliance has not been required. I can prove extensive documentation of violations that were illegal under the ordinance you already adopted and remain unsolved today. The scale and consistency of this non-compliance reflect not isolated oversight, but systematic failure. That failure rests with this council, and this is precisely why the public trust in this administration has eroded. As written, this new ordinance, which you appear prepared to pass without meaningful challenge, effectively legalizes years of non-compliance. It grandfathers in chicken wire fencing, motor homes, and boats stored in the front yard and side yards, car lots and operating in zones where they're prohibited, businesses and new construction built in improper zones, and unsafe parking layouts that require vehicles to back directly onto public streets, which is prohibited by the current and the new one, but still. And a clear example of that is La Popular, which is at the corner of East Main Street and Sand Mountain Drive, one of the biggest intersections in the city, where vehicles back into the traffic at a major intersection. Okay, this was a violation when you adopted the prior ordinance. It's never been enforced, and it is noted that our mayor received a $10,000 donation to his political campaign from La Popular. Okay, the question is not whether violations exist, it's whether the council is willing to correct them or continue to ratify them after the fact. That is, what assurance does this public have that this ordinance will be enforced any differently than the last one? As with the prior ordinance, the boundaries of the so-called sub-districts, including the civic district, the railroad district, the education district, and warehouse district, are not defined. Once again, this ordinance assigns the Board of Adjustments as the responsibility of identifying these areas. Same thing in 2015, and it wasn't done. This raises a simple and unavoidable question. Will these districts actually be identified this time, or will this responsibility again go unfulfilled? Without definition boundaries, these districts exist in name only, and enforcement is impossible. Passing the same requirement twice without ensuring follow-through only repeats the failures of the past. And Ordinance 2030-26 also fails to entirely address the short-term residential units such as Airbnb and VRBO in residential zones. Okay, these are commercial operations. They should be licensed, taxed, and approved through conditional use permits via the Board of Adjustments, so that neighbors know what's going on next to them and right in their very neighborhood. Currently, more than a dozen short-term rentals are listed just on 2 platforms, including a property on East Main Street which advertises accommodations for 22 people. You want that next door to you? Okay, whether these operators are licensed or paying lodging tax, which our lodging tax is the largest in the state, and right up there with Gulf Shores, is not addressed. And again, enforcement is absent. You have permitted B&Bs, but you haven't defined what a B&B is in the definition. So it's arbitrary and it's subject to interpretation. There again, a lawsuit. Further, the ordinance contains internal contradictions that guarantee confusion and selective enforcement. Non-residential auto car washes are listed under 2 conflicting multiple permitted categories. Yet the use itself is not clearly defined. Automobile sales and service are restricted to B3 zoning. yet such business operations elsewhere without action by this county, with this council, throughout the city. Convenience stores that do not sell gasoline are permitted in certain zones. However, the ordinance defines and states that convenience stores may sell gasoline. So it's a conflict right there. These provisions directly conflict. Which rule governs? Okay, the importance is only this council has the authority to clarify zone intent. You are the only ones that can grant exceptions or establish procedures for it varying from zone to zone. Okay, that authority does not belong to an ordinance officer, a business license clerk, or a board of adjustments, or the mayor. The responsibility rests here. It has to be further clarified. You can't expect an employee to interpret what you would like to happen. That's too subjective. And I acknowledge that the zoning map was necessary and long overdue. Its adoption was suggested 10 years ago, but again, it wasn't completed then, and it's 10 years too late. It does, however, provide a baseline for understanding how far zoning compliance has deteriorated under this council's watch. However, approving an ordinance that is materially the same, the one that's previously ignored, is not reform, it's avoidance. While this ordinance corrects some fee schedules and administrative items, it ultimately creates more ambiguity than clarity and raises more unanswered questions than it resolved. I'm a layperson, I'm not an attorney, and these are the problems that I've already noted with this ordinance because I have read it from front to back, and that sign stuff nearly tore me up. But anyway, this is not an effective leadership for the issue. So many Albertville residents are concerned, and you need to realize that.
Do you have any other, individuals want to address the council or this ordinance? That concludes, Wendy, did you want to address any of the concerns brought up?
I've jotted some of these down and I went back and looked at some things, so, I've maintained a list of comments, and one of the things I failed to mention is that, I'm also in town to work on the comprehensive plan, and the intent of that is to provide more guidance and policy on where future commercial uses should be, where future apartments, housing, and all the like should be, which would also help address questions of like where convenience stores, gas stations would be preferred, commercialized or otherwise. So that will help kind of refine eventually the more substantive change where I think we will be able to address a lot of the concerns that were raised today. Regarding the R4 and the R5, I'm gonna have to do some more digging in that. You know, unfortunately, I went back and looked because what I took was the draft that I was given as the current draft and just move stuff around. And so what I have is the change to what was mentioned could be, and it actually could be that eventually the R4 and R5 is even more giving when we look at it more robustly. So historically, all I know is that information is what I had, and that's what we use to do that. But we can also look at that from the setbacks, the number of units, and the like. The enforcement issues, historically, I can't speak to because I haven't been part of that enforcement process. Enforcement and the actual procedures, could be something we could update in the more substantive change. There were a number of things that I too noticed about, like certain uses were allowed in certain places and not. And that's certainly something from a planning standpoint I looked at and asked questions about, but the response has generally been, hey, that's kind of part of the bigger policy question again. The convenience stores versus the one that sell gas station, I think is a bigger discussion. But I will say the way I tend to suggest we write comprehensive updates to ordinances is that we have definitions for all uses. But we wouldn't have every specific use that you might have now. So instead of having, I think, art supply store, record store, and all these different things that are all retail, we would talk about where retail stores are allowed and then have a very clear definition of what retail stores are. so that there would be a definition for every single use and more consideration given about where each of those uses would be. The downtown overlay district, I agree, it's in there in text only at this point, because we could not identify where whatever the original intent was to put these on the map. So the decision was made to maintain that text, knowing that you can't apply it without it being on the zoning map. So the text is kind of holding until there's a determination to made about how to deal with the downtown zoning, so it's still just zoned, they're straight B zone. That could be another, I will say that could be another area where there will be change in the future, because in looking at the plan and what it says about downtown, what other previous, discussions about downtown, it may be that we discussed just redoing some of the overlays, consolidating, so there's a lot of perspective change that could come, but the intent would be if, in that next round of more substantive change, if the overlay district are to remain, they would be mapped at that point in time. So we wanted some time to go through this planning process to figure out the direction it's gonna go. Airbnbs is an actually interesting discussion that a lot of communities have. I had mentioned my work in Huntsville with signs. I also actually prepared a draft short-term rental regulations for them that they're working through. And there's a lot of discussion about having that. Sometimes it's regulated in zoning and sometimes it's not. So I think that can also be a discussion that comes out of the planning process of like what are the concerns and which is the best approach to do it. Because a lot of times they're more business with regards to taxes and everything. You're not enforcing taxes through zoning. But I think that's a really good opportunity to address an issue that is a hot topic for almost every community. And the same goes with the occupancy issues. I know that's a struggle. Every community has that. And that's again something we can look at more substantially in the longer part of this, which I would anticipate we're looking at these more recommendations and changes later on in this year.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'll just give one final opportunity if there was anyone else that wanted to address the council. All right, council can consider ordinance 2030-26.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2030-26 to adopt the City of Albertville zoning ordinance and provide that it shall supersede all previous versions.
Second.
Dr. Schmidt, please call roll.
Broadhurst,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Oakley,
Yes.
Kenner,
Yes.
unanimous to approve.
That concludes the business of the council this morning. We'll start with closing comments from Councilman Kendall.
Yeah, just, thank you everyone for being here today. Good to see everyone.
Councilman Bailey.
I would echo those sentiments.
Councilwoman Oakley.
I want to say congratulations to our Albertville High School cheerleaders on winning national champions in their division. That's a proud thing for our community, and I'm excited for them and for our high school community over this. Don't forget tonight at 6 p.m. at the depot, it's your opportunity to come out and have input in this growth and development and zoning ordinance plan that we're going to be looking at over this next year in our city. And I want to mention two events at the Albertville Museum. On February the 18th, the Albertville Museum turns 135. Our city turns 135, so on February the 18th, the museum is hosting a cake and punch all day at the museum, and the public's invited to stop by. That's February the 18th on Albertville's 135th birthday. Just come enjoy your community time and have some cake and punch. Also, the museum is sponsoring a historic bus tour of Albertville on the Jackson Trail on February the 28th. It's an all-day kind of event from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. The first 12 people that make reservations, they're going to be going in a 15-passenger van and driving this historic trail Andrew Jackson made across the mountain. Tickets are $60. It includes lunch. First 12 people that make reservations are going to be the ones that get to go on this trip, and the tour guide's gonna be our own Danny Motley from the museum. He does a great job telling the history of Albertville. All the proceeds from this ticket sale event go to the Albertville Museum. Stop by the museum if you're interested in tickets for this amazing event. And thank
city has got some growing pains, we all know that. But thank you, God bless you, God bless our city, God bless our state and our country, because it needs all the help it can get. Thank you.
Mayor Hunter?
Thanks everybody for being here, and again, encourage folks to come out tonight. That's a lot of why we're here, to, make corrections and try to position the city to be, you know, in a better place for years to come. There'll always be changes that needs to be made, and we're just, you know, we wanna hear from you guys and things that need to be addressed, you know, that's why we're here, so, thank y'all.
Thank you. I'll just echo the sentiments that have already been shared, and, just kind of share that, we all have the same frustration. You know, this first step is, I wouldn't call it a half measure, but it's a step in the right direction. It was just a cleanup that needed to be done to make it, our current zoning ordinance easier to understand and apply for, our personnel and for the general public to digest it. And that's really all it was about, just to have a starting point to get into this broader planning process. There are a lot of shared concerns in policy, that Bonnie shared, that I think a lot of the community shares, and hope that you all will make your voice heard at this opportunity tonight, as we begin the planning, the comprehensive planning part of this. A lot of people don't understand, I didn't understand really till I got into city politics, that's how a zoning ordinance is made. So before we wanna make significant changes to a zoning ordinance, you want to have an updated comprehensive plan, which addresses all future land use for the entire jurisdiction of the city, where you identify what the challenges and opportunities are, and then you identify what policy changes may need to be made to accomplish those goals in the long term, which in turn will turn into a update to the zoning ordinance where changes will actually be made. So that's the process we're beginning. This was kind of just a cleanup and reset, so we had a good starting point. So I know it's kind of frustrating that we're not really addressing anything yet, but we're beginning that process tonight as we engage with you, and through the week, Wendy will be meeting with strategic partners to make sure that we're getting good feedback so that we can make a good long-term plan for the city. So hopefully you guys will be involved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.